Once upon a time, stories of fantasy. People suffering with OCD aren't living a fantasy. Even though there are a lot of myths that go around obsessive compulsive disorder, their stories are real. These are stories from the OCD side. Real people, real stories brought to you by FamilyOCD.com and InvisibleWheelchair.com. We want your story. Go to InvisibleWheelchair.com and contact us to tell us your story here. OCD is real. OCD treatments are real. OCD recovery is real. And so are these stories. So, Jonathan, thank you so much for being part of the Stories from the OCD side on the Invisible Wheelchair podcast.
I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for letting me participate. I hope I can help bring some light to this topic.
Well, your story, from what I read of it, is a very powerful story, and I'm sure it will. So I'd like to just go ahead and jump right into the story and tell about what went on for you and your journey with OCD.
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Jonathan Schultz. I was formally diagnosed with OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder, when I was 19 or 20, right around there. But I didn't get the appropriate help and therapy until just 2 years ago, when I was 32 years old. Kind of going back, I'm assuming your audience knows what OCD is, but just to give a quick little summary, it's, you get thoughts, feelings, or emotions that get stuck in your head, cause an intense anxiety, and then you do things to make them go away, which are compulsions. So my story is this. From a young age, kind of taking you back at the beginning to show, and then when I really hit ahead, because after I was diagnosed, I was able to look back into my childhood and kind of see some patterns that I wish I would have known about. But, back then there wasn't a lot of OCD diagnoses. Probably from the age of 7 or 8 is when I had my first panic attack and what I would call an OCD cycle. I went to a Christian school, and they told us of the sin that if you commit, you'll go to hell, which is not good to tell someone when you're 7 years old and don't have OCD coping skills. For days, I just thought about, if I committed this sin and if I was going to go to hell and if I did it and what I did wrong. And I just spun for days and days and days. I just spun. And I can still remember that to this day, almost 30 years ago. Throughout, then going into high school, I would always think other people, like if I'd walk by somebody and they would laugh, I'd get it stuck in my head that they were talking about me. So I would have this fear or this obsession that they were talking about me. And then I would do all these weird internal rituals to get them to go away. I would play into my head over and over that, no, they couldn't be talking about me because I was over here. I'm really a good person anyway, so they wouldn't be talking about me, in this standpoint. And then just random things that would get stuck throughout the day. When it really hit ahead was when I transitioned into college. I was, 18, 19 years old. I was playing baseball and I was losing balls in the outfield. Played my whole life. I've never had an issue. And then all of a sudden I was a college baseball player and I couldn't see balls in the outfield. So we went to doctors, got my eyes checked, all of these things. Well, then I was diagnosed with anxiety. And what the psychologist was saying is that when you get anxious, your eyes and pupils can dilate. For me, it was causing vision issues. So that was kind of my first, when it started to really impact my life, was about the age of 18 or 19. Again, I wasn't diagnosed with OCD, but that's what it was. So for a few years, kind of just limped through. I was prescribed medication, which I'm not scared to talk about. So I was prescribed an antidepressant. It definitely helped me. Then the big diagnosis came when I was 21. I was going to school, playing baseball. And then I went to a small Christian school. And I just started getting these intrusive thoughts that I was a bad person. I was dating my now wife, then girlfriend at the time. And, I never cheated on her, did anything like that, but I wasn't always the best when it came to kind of flirting with girls and things like that. So I then got it stuck in my head that I was this bad person. And I literally, it was January, February of my senior year in college. And I just had a breakdown. I couldn't get these thoughts out of my head that I was going to hell. I was a bad person. And I just left college. I was in my dorm. I picked up my pillow. I walked out to my Ford Mustang, and I just drove home. I called my mom and dad, crying, and I was like, I can't do it. I'm done. I can't finish school. I'm going to hell. I was a bad boyfriend. I wasn't perfect, because a big theme of mine is perfectionism. And then my parents met me on Highway 65. I don't know how familiar you are with California, but they met me at a Jack in the Box, and they drove me home because I couldn't handle it. So I waited at a Jack in the Box. That is when the next day, when I met with the psychologist again, I was formally diagnosed with OCD. I kind of limped along for the next few years. My psychologist wasn't. I actually talk about him in when I write a few things in a very negative light, actually. He didn't really do much for me. He told me what I had. He didn't give me any therapy tips. And this is why I'm very passionate about this topic. So what happened was, diagnosed me, gave me a few little tips that, looking back, were awful, weren't good tips at all. Then fast forward, because there's just blurps here and there that I don't think are necessary to talk about for this intro. But what really hit it ahead was 3 years ago. I was finishing up my dissertation. So I have my doctorate degree in leadership. At the very end, you have to write a 250-page research paper. I was finishing up my dissertation. I was working. I have 3 kids. Stress really impacts OCD. And if you don't have the tools to attack your thoughts, getting over it is just going to be impossible. And so in spring of 2020 is when COVID hit. Okay, so I was finishing up my dissertation. I'm a counselor at a community college. So I was told on a Thursday, hey, by the way, everybody, you're going remote for the next year. I hate technology. I don't do it well. I'm terrible. So, I was finishing that up. I had my 3rd kid. I had to then, leave my work and be all by myself here in my office. And I just very quickly fell back into the OCD trap of obsessing about everything. And what happens with OCD is, you'll get one thought, and then, depending on the person, you tend to jump around. So I had one thought where it was real bad, and then I'd kind of get over that, and then I'd get another one. And then on May 20th, I finally came out of my office, and I told my wife, I wasn't sure if I really wanted to keep living. I was very suicidal, very, very depressed. When you have OCD, you just feel like your thoughts are in control of you, and you don't know what to do. It's really like, I think of like walking into we live out in the country. So every now and again, we'll see big bees that leave one hive to go to another. And there's literally thousands of bees that will come over your head. And you always hope that they go through you. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And that's really what living with OCD is like, especially when you don't know what to do about it. So I walked out of my office, and I just told my wife, with our 3 kids running in the front yard, like, I just can't handle this. I don't know what to do. I was, crying, and I had no idea, then what happens is you get this feeling of guilt, because here I am. My wife stays home with her kids, so I'm the sole provider. And, I'm looking outside, and I'm seeing my kids run around, then you get a guilty feeling, because, when you want to kill yourself, and you're you don't want to be here. It's just, then you get another emotion that gets stuck in your head, which is that guilt of, well, now I'm leaving a family, and I'm not going to be able to provide for them. After that day, we decided to find a therapist. Ironically, this is how I got set up with my current. I'm going to a specialist, and this is why I really am passionate about OCD. And then I'll tell about my actual, like, the second big suicidal episode. We went to the local psychologist, the same guy that I went to 8 years ago, 10 years ago at this point. And he's told me, I said, I had all these books, and I said, look, I want to know what to do. Like, I just don't know. Like, I was so lost, and, I went to school, I played baseball. I always figured out what to do, working out, hitting, all that stuff. And I had no idea what to do. It was the scariest thing in my life because I literally thought my thoughts were running me. My wife didn't know what to do. And I asked this guy, I said, tell me what to do. Like, I'll do whatever I have to do. And he basically just said, all you can do is take more medication. And I was like, and this is literally a practicing psychologist here in Porterville where I live. So I mean, that didn't help anything. The next day I had a psychiatrist appointment, which I had no idea what was going to happen. I took a leave of absence from work. I was supposed to do some extra hours at work over the summer. But I had to take a leave because I couldn't handle it. And then the psychiatrist luckily said, I just met with somebody that had OCD a while ago. You should check out this place in Los Angeles. It's called OCDLA. All they do is OCD. And he said, if you look at the research, medication definitely helps. However, some people it doesn't. And in fact, the traditional, not traditional, excuse me, the therapy for OCD, which is exposure and response prevention, actually helps better than just medication with people. And I was blown away. So I literally got off the phone, called the place right then. One of the good things with OCD is you get impulsive, so you get stuff done a lot. So there's some positives too. There really is. So I called him that second, and then believe it or not, my now therapist called me back about 2 hours later. They emailed my information to him, and then I was able to get into the appropriate therapy at that point, which I've been in for the last year and a half. But it's been the hardest thing in my life has been dealing with and going through this OCD journey. I mean, I've written a book and I've written a dissertation. I went to school. I've had kids. This has been the hardest thing ever, because when you feel like your thoughts are in control and you don't know what to do about it, that's the scary thing. I remember, and I had said I was going to mention my second suicidal breakdown right before, just 2 or 3 days before this, how I got connected with the psychiatrist. We took a short little trip to the beach. And as I was driving, all the thoughts just came in my head, that all my different sub themes for OCD thoughts. And you almost feel sometimes dizzy. It's you feel dizzy and overwhelmed. And I didn't know where I was really. I started having a horrible panic attack, thought I was having a stroke. I had to pull over and let my wife drive home. When we got home, I just laid there, I'm just sobbing. And I told her, I said, honestly, like, you need to stay with me. I don't know if I may end up, I may end up killing myself. I'm not a good person. I have these terrible thoughts in my head. I can't get them out. It's just the most helpless and hopeless feeling that you'd ever have. So now, fast forward 2 years, and I've gotten the right therapy, and I know what to do. It doesn't make it easy. I still have bad days. I really do. I mean, I had last week, I had a few bad days, and you'll find out sometimes sleep impacts you, things like that. But now that I have the tools, it's made it manageable, I guess I should say.
And if you don't mind me asking, what the suicide factor of it?
Yeah.
How does that? Do you feel that is under control, or where do you see yourself with that?
Yeah. So I won't lie. I mean, even throughout the last 2 years, there's been times where you start getting the thoughts that creep back in, and you think about it. Now, though, it's more of a way to escape, where I don't think, like, before it was something I was scared that I would act on. And now it's more of like, man, I kind of just wish I wasn't here to not deal with it. So it's nothing that my wife's scared about. It's nothing really that I get too scared about anymore. Ironically, there is a theme of OCD called harm OCD, where you can get a harm thought stuck in your head. So that comes in every now and again, but no, nothing as scary as it was 2 years ago, and nothing wanting to be away and be dead like I wanted to 2 years ago, mainly because now I know that I can get through it. Before, I had no idea. And again, if I listened to that other therapist, I'd be on all kinds of meds right now, and I wouldn't have gotten the treatment, and it's unfortunate that there's still people out there like that. In fact, I remember talking with my therapist, and I told him that when I first called him, I said, are you just going to prescribe me meds? And he was like, well, no, like, we got to work on it. I said, well, I was just told by a local guy that's basically all that can. And he said something to the effect of, that's been blown out of the water since 94 or something like that.
Yeah. And
84, so that's, yeah.
Well, that's a common problem. That's I think it's getting a little better, but I remember we've been involved in this for 12 years with two kids. It started about 12 years ago with my first child. So, and at that time, finding somebody that even knew what it was difficult. Finding the resources is a problem for a lot of people. So, you know, as you mentioned, people in my audience knows this, that most of them that have listened to it for a while know all the bad stuff about it. You know, there's
Yeah.
a lot to that part of it. OCD is not a fun thing to go through at all. But I like to ask if there are things now that you're kind of, I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but you're on the other side of it.
Yeah.
Do you see stuff that's been more positive through this journey? That you've come out of it going, this is OCD's really put me in this place that's better or something. Do you see any of that with your own life?
Yeah. In fact, it's funny you say that, and I'm glad that your audience has already gone through some of the bad stuff. I don't mind talking about that, so ask me anything. But it is kind of nice if you already know all the bad stuff to focus on the good stuff, and I would love to do that. There's definitely been some good things. In fact, my therapist and I were kind of laughing about it a week or so ago because he said something about, OCD hasn't been that bad to you. I will explain where from the kind of personal work, aspect of it. People with OCD definitely have very high rates of being on disability, suicide, depression. There is that. However, one thing I've noticed in talking with other people with OCD, because you tend to be impulsive and because you tend to, depending on your issues and your sub themes, check and be almost like a perfectionist, when you can get it under control, it's very helpful for making sure that you finish your tasks. I mean, like really, I mean, it's now, don't get me wrong, there's that time where like you think you're going to get fired at work. I mean, I fired myself from my job so many times,
Yeah.
but there's this hyper, like, I got to get it done. I gotta get it right now. And so for example, my wife and I published this book, and I have just been hyper focused and obsessed with, I want to get all the right categories online, and there's a lot that goes into it. And I've basically finished all of it because, again, there's that piece of your brain, and now I'm kind of learning how to control it a little bit more, or at least utilize it, where it's, you get hyper focused on, and you're like, I just got to get this done now. But that your life's not going to come to an end like before. Before, if I didn't get it done now, my life would come to an end. Now it's like I still have that piece, and I know, like, okay, this is OCD driven, but I'm just going to get it done. And I feel like, I don't know, I think people with OCD, I mean, I'm biased, obviously, because I have it. I feel like we have pretty creative brains.
Yeah.
And I think we have to, because you think about this, and I wrote about this on a blog, right? If we can convince ourselves that one day that we have cancer, the next day that we have this, we convince ourselves of so many things. Our brain is super creative. Like, once you can kind of harness that, it's like, all right, like, let's use that creativity for good, So like now, instead of thinking I have cancer every other day, which is something I've definitely done, I feel like that creative, because that's a creative thing. If you think about it, I mean, how many other people stub their toe and then the next day they've already said that they're going to die of, a tumor because their toe is broken, and then the tumor grew, and then you got sepsis, right? Like that's happened to me. When you get, that's a creative thing. So I've noticed that, like, for me personally, I'm able to use that creative mind in other things, especially because that's still there, but the overreacting to all the little thoughts isn't. And then the second thing, for me personally, and I'm a person of faith, I kind of feel like I like talking about things, and I don't know what it is, but when people see me and I talk about my mental health struggles, it always shocks them, or seems to shock them. And I think for me, the good is, I think I'm actually almost made to go through this to help other people. About a year ago, my wife and I both were like, in a way, like, let's turn this into something good, and let's try to impact. I like talking, so like giving speeches is something that I don't mind at all. I don't mind opening up about my struggles. There's a few thoughts I'm not as open about telling people I've had.
Come on now. let's get
Yeah.
the secrets out.
Yeah. I got a few that, are just between me and my therapist, as I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
But other than that, like I'm not scared of it. And some are, and I understand that and I respect it. And I was like that. But I really think for me personally, the positive is helping others. It sucks for me, but I think that honestly, ultimately, I really feel a passion to help other people. And there's been some good that have come out of it so far. And I think that my life is just a drop in the bucket. There's a lot of other people out there. So I think my struggles are almost something I'm supposed to go through to help other people. I really do believe that now.
No,
I
I
really do.
think I believe that, of a lot of the people that I've interviewed, I feel the same things. They want to get the message out so other people know about it, because we need to get that. We need to advocate for it, for
Absolutely.
ourselves, but also to advocate to let people know, hey, you're not alone. This is
Yeah.
not, you're not the oddball. There's a lot of people going through this. So, um, well, what what would be your advice to somebody that just found out that they've been diagnosed, or they haven't been diagnosed, but they're thinking that this is what's going on? What would your thoughts be on what to do?
You need to find a specialist that either only deals with OCD or deals with it a lot. The first thing is, well, even before that, and I actually was just talking to someone yesterday that we think that someone in their life is, well, I'm pretty sure they have it. And before that is just knowing this is not a death sentence. It's going to feel like it is. The person going through it is not going to know what to do. The person helping them is probably not going to know what to do. There's going to be some pretty nasty thoughts at times, depending on your themes when you look them up. Someone's out there. To the layman, it seems awful, like you should be institutionalized. I mean, it's just the way
Yeah.
it is, but it's not. I mean, it's not a death sentence. You're not, you're not going crazy. It's something that you can deal with, even if these thoughts are on, the worst spectrum, which honestly mine, from the research I've done, have been pretty bad. Some of the worst that you could have. So that's the first thing, is it's not a death sentence. But the second thing is you've got to do the work, and you've got to find a specialist. You have to find someone that specializes in what to do. I won't go too deep because I know you've had someone else on here already talking about it, but with OCD, you don't just think positive thoughts and go get a hug all the time from people. In fact, sometimes that's a negative. That could be a reassurance compulsion. There's been many times now where I'm on this end of my OCD journey, where I'll go to my wife for reassurance on things, and she'll look at me and she'll turn around and she'll walk away. And so you got to get ready to do the work. You've got to you got to do your homework. There's going to be times where you're not necessarily going to like it. I mean, the exposure piece of OCD, which is where you go back towards your uncomfortable thoughts. That kind of sucks, really does. But you just have to do it, and the evidence is there. I mean, OCD has been researched for years that the evidence is there. So it's going to work if you do the work. I mean, almost always it's going to at least bring it down to manageable. Because I firmly believe and there's a lot of stuff out in literature about this, but I firmly believe that if you have OCD, you're always going to have little attacks here or there. I think if you don't, you might not have actually had it, or I mean, that's up for debate, right?
Yeah.
Now, but again, it's going from a 10 down to a 2 or a 3 or whatever. So knowing that it's not a death sentence, there's millions of people that have it. The research is out there now. I mean, back in the 80s, all they did was just give them medication. They didn't know how to do it, but now they do.
Yeah.
But really then saying, look, do the homework and get ready to do it. It might not take a month or two. I'm 2 years in. Although I've had it my whole life, I've really only been able to deal with it for 2 years. I still go to monthly therapy. I still have homework every day, and you just have to, do the work and trust the process. But then also, and this is hard for people with OCD because normally we're perfectionists, not beat yourself up when you have a bad day. I do that a lot still. I have a bad day. I'm like, go to my wife, like, what's happening? I'm putting in all this work. And she just turns away and walks away from me, because that's the reassurance compulsion there. Just get ready to do the work and then try to find the good in it. I mean, that's kind of the last thing, is try to find the good. Maybe you're meant to go help other people. Maybe you're meant to talk about it, or maybe someone else looking at you going through it, you might help inspire them to go to therapy or something along those
Yeah.
lines. So, but it's
Well,
not a death sentence.
I like what you said about not beating yourself up, because the one of the things that we've learned especially is OCD keeps coming back, trying its best to hit you again.
For sure.
And so yeah, there are going to be times when it's going to come back at you, and you're not going to be able to handle it as well that particular day.
Yeah.
So you don't want to beat yourself up, because you got the
No.
next day that you can come back and beat up that bully.
Absolutely. And take that time to figure out every now and again. What I found is there's little tiny compulsions that I'm not necessarily catching. Am I really, watching this movie to escape the thought I'm having? Or then you can kind of learn things from it. So yeah, I mean, look back on that bad day through your journal or thought notes and figure out, maybe there's something I could learn. If not, then yeah, I mean, I just had a bad day a few days ago. So, you got to kind of dust your boots off.
Well, I'm going to give you a chance to do a shameless plug here, because I see the book back there, and my audience isn't going to be able to see it because it's audio. But and we're going to, our hope is that, and for everybody to stay tuned, because we're going to try to get Jonathan and his wife back in to talk about the book and talk about their work together and all that. But let's at least mention your book here, and then, like I said, we'll go into it more on our next interview.
My wife and I wrote a book that just came out about 2 months ago. It's called Obsessed: A Couple's Story Dealing with Obsessive Compulsive Disorder and Their Strategies on How to Deal with This Condition. We wrote this, and this is a true story. The second suicidal breakdown that I had, I was on my bed just crying, just profusely, didn't know what was happening. And my wife looked at me and she said, "How can I help you?" And I said, "I don't know." And the next day the following is when we finally had our appointment. And we both kind of figured out, you know what, when we figure out what to do, we want to write it down to help other people. So this isn't necessarily like just a story about us. It is. I mean, you'll hear from me for about 20 pages, my wife from about 10. But really what sets this book apart is, and we haven't really found anything out here like this that we have found yet on Amazon or other book places, we actually share our story, but then we say, this is what we have done per the research and per the evidence-based stuff that we've learned with me going through therapy on what to look for. My wife talks about how there are times where your loved one will come to you and say, just want to make sure, like, you love me, right? Everything's good. And she'll turn around and not answer, because that's a reassurance compulsion. So the book is aimed at literally being something that someone suffering with it, or someone supporting someone that suffers it, can read. So, like, I give my advice on exposures and things like that in a lighthearted way, not super academic. So
sounds wonderful, Jonathan. And I very much appreciate you being vulnerable and telling your story here, because it's one that I'm sure will inspire others. Especially, I haven't had anybody on with not that I can think about that really talked about the suicide part of, that threat in the back of your mind kind of thing with going. So I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us here. And I look forward to us sitting down again, talking more about your book and the work that you guys are wanting to do and the direction you want to go with this. So again, thank you so much for being part of this.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
So that is our story for this podcast. Remember, we want your story told here. If you want to tell us your success story, or just want to tell us where you're at, simply go to www.invisiblewheelchair.com, then click on the Tell Us Your Story on the top left side, or just click the Contact Don button on the right side towards the bottom. We want to give you a voice to your story. Until next time, keep working on your story for a happily ever after and